Welcome back to the third episode of,
Bean stuff.
and today we are talking about the mystery of decaf coffee.
That's right.
And,
It's not always been I'm not sure if it is a mystery, but it seems like it.
well, it made a good title.
Okay.
But, yeah, so what did we talk about last week? Grinders last week.
Yes. Yes, I had a few questions about it. I was quite surprised what people were thinking about.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter at bean_stuff or on Facebook at beanstuff, or beanstuff.com and get links to all of that. That's enough plugging, though.
Good.
So last week we were talking about grinders, and I already have a question, but I think I'm going to be jumping ahead if I ask it now.
Okay.
So let's jump right into it. Decaffeinated coffee. I have what I think is an obvious reason why, but give me a why. Why do they make decaf?
Why did they make decaf? There's a number of reasons decaf is becoming even more popular than it was 10 years ago. Top of the head would be medical, sleep. If you want to get to sleep, don't go to decaf. Anxiety. Sometimes your doctor will say you need to lay off the caffeine, the coffee, which always sort of annoys me a little bit because they don't say get off the
They don't
chocolate,
say sugar,
Mountain
salt.
Dew, which has way more caffeine than coffee. So it's an interesting. I wish they would broaden it out a little bit and just say don't have any chocolate. Anyway, so sleep, anxiety. There's just in some ways there's just a lack of estate coffees. There's not so many to choose from, and that for some that makes it a little harder.
Well, let me start with this question. This might be a really silly question, but you talked about different estate coffees and things. Can you grow decaffeinated coffee?
There's sort of a rumor, myth, but there's some truth to it as well. I believe I'm thinking like 2004, someone decided they had been able to grow a decaffeinated tree, which we'd always joked about. But it sounds like scientists are trying to do that. I don't think they're quite there, certainly not production-wise, to do it yet.
Well, and I wonder what the quality would be like on a genetically changed tree.
Yeah, well, they're hoping it's not a genetic. They hope they found this tree that already does it naturally, and then they'll use that. But the quality, those are good questions. I mean, and how much can you produce from one tree? Because one tree only does 1 pound of coffee. It's not much.
Well, and how much of the world's coffee is decaf?
How much? It's a good question.
Like percentage of production.
Yeah. Probably. I mean, if you for a roaster, typically it's 10% or less. So I would think probably in the world it's probably some similar sort of statistics of 10% perhaps.
Do you roast a decaf every day?
We do actually. I mean, I say sometimes it's just £5, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 40, but it's as I say, it's only 10% of our whole day would be decaf.
Gotcha. So you're seeing a little bit more decaf though recently, or in the last little bit.
That's right. And there's a number of reasons why that's beginning to increase. It's interesting. I was reading the other day about, I guess, they're baby boomers. Not sure what period that's in, but 18 to 24 age group are increasing their intake of coffee, almost more so than caffeine at this moment. It's going to equalize out again. But there's been a real boom. I think that's mainly due to you've got specialty coffee, but then you've got within that quality, and I think that has been the big player that's driving now that you can have a good decaf that tastes good, and that's not always been the case.
And would you say that kind of points towards people enjoying coffee for coffee, and not necessarily having coffee as a means to wake yourself up or stay awake? It's people are actually starting to enjoy the coffee itself.
I think so.
Because they want to be able to drink it all the time now.
Right.
And not be limited by not going to sleep or whatever.
That's right. And I think very much so because the quality has gone up. That's increased their ability to enjoy the coffee. Then you've got the roasters who have we've always decaf, I guess we've got to do that. But now it's, we're learning how to roast your coffee, the decaf, which is a different bean. It's gone through a different country. It's gone its origin, then it's gone to somewhere else, then it's come to us. It's gone through dehydration, re-dried. It's done a lot of things have happened to it. It's a much softer bean, not so much oil. Therefore, you've got to roast it differently. And if you take the care and the attention, you can get a pretty good decaf coffee.
Well, and what's funny, so real quick, I was on Twitter last night, about 1 a.m. in the morning.
Whoa.
And
Before or after the run?
That was after running.
Okay.
And I found this guy on Twitter, and his handle on Twitter is decaf _a _nation. So it's Decafa Nation. Anyway, he all of his stuff is dedicated mostly to decaf coffee, and he's deeply passionate about it. So as you're talking about kind of this resurgence of passion, or almost just like for the first time in a sense, quality decaf coffee. I thought of him last night, and I thought, oh man, there's another indicator of people really getting excited about it.
Yes, because people like him and whoever, even the way you prepare coffee, whether it's caffeinated or not, there's been so much work put into how you extract, how much time, what the weight, what the ratio is, that especially the caffeinated coffee is good and better, but so is decaffeinated suddenly becoming a better coffee, because not only you're roasting it better now, the people are preparing it even better than they used to. So that just sets it apart one more time.
And to kind of change our focus a little bit, but oh man, there's so many things I want to say all at once. The process of decaffeination. And my first question is, does that happen pre-roast or post-roast?
Oh, right.
Or both?
No, it happens pre-roast, before we even get the green bean into the roastery.
Okay, so it's not something a roaster is going to be doing.
Not typically, unless you're a big player and you could do that. No, I don't know. I don't know of any. What you can do more these days is have your coffee that you have from your supplying your farmer, and you can get it sent to be decaffeinated, a certain 20 bags or whatever, a container of your mini containers of coffee. I want that much decaffeinated, please. So you can get a little more specific.
Gotcha. So what are some? Well, I correct me if I'm wrong. There's not many methods of decaffeinating coffee, correct?
There's not a lot
that are largely used,
right?
Like massive.
True. Yeah, that's right.
Mass production.
4 or 5 that I know of. There's probably a lot more, but yeah.
Which is kind of, I don't know. To me, that's kind of amazing. There's only a couple ways to skin the cat. But so what are the major players in decaffeinating coffee? Or the major players, major methods people use.
I mean, if you break it down, there's sort of, I guess there's two methods that are used, and one of the methods, unfortunately, has a chemical name, so people naturally go, ooh.
Not a very marketable
Not so
process.
marketable. Whereas you go to the water process that nowadays people know a lot more about, and it's much more tolerated. The name, it's much more, sounds so much better.
So what is the chemical name?
The chemical, there's two. The biggest one is methylene chloride, and I told you it's got a chemical sounding name.
That sounds like something like a murderer would
use. Some people,
or in a chemist lab.
Yeah, I guess some people who even think of using decaf, it probably is murder in a sense, but to the coffee. But no, it's not at all. And there's the other one is ethyl acetate, which is similar. The interesting, ethyl acetate, it's naturally known as a natural coffee. When I say natural, it's just produced naturally in the environment, and plants produce it.
But it's been given a big scary name.
Well, the reason it's got a bit of a scary name is because you can't go to that many flowers and get that much ethyl acetate out. You've got to produce it in some way.
So it's more of an extract in a sense, like it's a reduced version.
You get 50 gallons of it rather than whatever ounces you're going to get from
But
a
it
flower.
is naturally harvested, or is it?
It's chemically a little bit more reproduced in that way, but that's why they can say on the label it's natural in terms it comes from it is a natural producing product.
I feel like I need to get my periodic table of elements out.
You probably should. Not a bad idea.
See if I can locate some of that. So there's those two methods. There's the water method. Can we kind of go through each one of those three?
Sure.
Let's start with
Let's just go through 2 of them. That's probably enough because they both have very similar.
So are both chemical ones kind of a very similar process?
Yeah, that's slightly different, but
so let's go through the chemical process first, which in some sense is not chemical because one is semi-normally natural-ish. So let's go through that.
Well, actually, funny, I should say, it's interesting. You get to the end of the decaffeinated process of the methylene chloride, and you will find you only have 1 part per million that's left of the methyl chloride left in the coffee. You're allowed, just for safety reasons from the Drug Administration, they would say you're allowed 10 parts per million. There's 1 part per million. I mean, this is, you can't find the stuff. It's not there, basically.
And it's not going to kill you if you have
No.
1 part
It
per
won't,
million.
they say it won't kill you, you have 10 parts per million.
Fair enough.
So there you go.
So you could have 10 times the amount of coffee.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the chemical process, is it scary? Is it as bad as the name sounds?
No, I don't think so. No. Basically, they both use solvent, and basically they're trying to strip something away. It's like what's the one? Acetone people use on their fingernails to get rid of the nail polish. It's a solvent, gets rid of the nail polish.
So,
and this is really what the methyl chloride. That's what it's doing. It's getting rid of the caffeine.
wow. So I am a decaffeinating plant, not a plant. I guess a factory or whatever.
Right. Yes.
You give me your green coffee.
Yes.
What do I now do with it? I dump it in a vat? Or
Oh,
what?
okay. Yeah.
What does that look like?
I mean, I'm not a chemist and I don't work in these industries, so I know the basics. But you're right. Basically, you drop the beans into a vat, a large vat, where it's just soaked with steam or hot water, because they wanted to expand it, want to increase the size. Therefore, the surface area gets bigger. So now they can get the chemical. And don't be off put by that word into the bean, so the chemical can like be like a magnet, attract the caffeine, and they can take the caffeine out.
Wow. And so
way more to it than that, but that's what I'm saying.
At a 50,000 foot level, though, it looks somewhat like that. So you're dumping the beans into a vat. You are.
I mean, if you wanted to, you could probably say it looks from that angle or that distance. It probably looks like a giant washing machine. I mean, you're putting your clothes in, you've got all this water, and it's just soaking. I don't know about the surface area changing of the clothes. I hope they don't, because they'd probably be the opposite.
It might always shrink.
Yeah, perhaps that's not a good illustration.
But yeah, I think I get what you're saying. So it soaks it, and is that kind of it? Like they just literally soak it a couple times?
What they've found is for instance, the methylene chloride, and also actually the ethyl acetate, they are very selective, very specific, and they go for the caffeine.
Really?
It's sort of, what's that? It's like in a blood disease where someone's just, it's somebody just targeting certain parts of your blood and it's pulling it out.
The actual chemical itself is specifically targeting caffeine.
Yes, exactly.
That blows my mind.
And then they do a few other things of soaking, getting it all out again, and
so there's a process to get the beans out
get the beans separated now, get the chemicals separated out, keep the beans, and then send them on to us.
Wow. And when they've gone through that process, so I sent you some green beans to do that with, and I kept some. If I looked at yours, what you had done after the decaffeination process, do they look different from the other ones?
They do.
Normal?
They do look very different. And
really?
Whatever method you use, whether you use the Swiss water, whether you use the chloride, they're going to look different. They're going to look like they're a little tanned. They've been soaked and they've gone through a process, and therefore they've been leached in some ways, and therefore they change the colour. That typical. If you've seen a green coffee seed, it looks very green.
Hence the name.
But it goes through that process and it goes more tanny. It changes.
Interesting.
And as you go through the roasting process, you've got to roast it very different, because you cannot rely now on colour. Not that you can really only rely on colour when you're roasting anyway, but decaf is just a different animal, and you've got to do different things.
So you could roast the decaf coffee for the same amount of time as a caffeinated coffee, and the color may be different.
Yes, the color will be different.
Wow.
You're not going to get, there's signs that when it's a roast you're looking for oil. We don't really want oil, but as the bean enlarges and increases in size, things go on, and if it's got less oil in there to start with, less water in there to start with, it's going to change how quickly it roasts, how quickly it develops in the roaster. Typically, I mean, there's different ways to go about that, but we would look at, therefore, think, okay, I'm getting decaf into my roaster machine now. I'm going to start at a lower temperature.
And I know that, like, you use roast log.
Yes.
Which tracks like the time it takes as well as the temperature of the coffee and graphs it for you.
Yes.
And so if you were to look at those two side by side, one for a caffeinated, one for a decaffeinated, the caffeinated and decaffeinated would look different as far as like they might be a shorter amount of time. Temperature might also be different. Is that
Not so much. It
No?
could be. It will. I mean, it will be. I mean, yeah, every bean you put in, whether it's caffeinated or not, whether it's a Brazil or Guatemala, it's going to be different how it plays out because every bean is unique. And therefore, it's going to be the density, the size, the altitude of the bean, it changes. Decaffeination just changes it a little more, and you've got to be more careful.
Wow. And here, I don't know if this is a really good question or if it's just my brain
Bring it on.
doing something. But do you ever have a blend where you say, I like the flavor of that decaf coffee. I want that flavor added to my caffeinated coffee.
Whoa.
So you're mixing purely for the flavor aspect.
That's very interesting.
And you
question.
mix both together to then have to, I mean, I can assume that'd be a roasting challenge.
Yeah, well, it's a challenge, like I say, with density of bean. That's a challenge just with caffeinated, let alone bringing in the roast and the decaffeinated part into it as well. The closest I've ever got to that, we have two Sumatras at work. One is a caffeinated, one is a decaffeinated. This one is particularly happens to be the Swiss water process.
Is it
one.
the same Sumatra both times?
Yes.
So one pre...
Like I was saying, the company we've got it through, I don't know who got that through, Inter-American I think it was, they get a lot of coffee and they sent a certain amount every 2 months or so. They sent a certain amount to get decaffeinated.
Wow.
We got some of that. I put it in the sample roaster, tasted it, thought, wow! If you like Sumatra, you're going to love this. I tasted the caffeinated one that we already had, and I went, wow, this is really good. Just a moment. I can't tell the difference. So what I did, just to make sure I wasn't making this up, the next cuppings, we have free cuppings every Friday, 9:30. And I decided, I know what I'm going to do. So I put two coffees out, the caffeinated and the decaffeinated Sumatra, blind, so no one knew which one it was. I didn't even tell them one was decaffeinated. And they were slurped away and did all our cupping, acidity and body and all that stuff we did. And then I said, okay, which one do you like? And they're sort of a very subjective questions. As cuppers, we don't really like to ask too many subjective questions. And well below me, 50-50.
No way.
And it was so close. They said, well, if I had to say, I'd go this one or this one. But they said there's not much difference. Voila. Things have changed from 10 years ago when you would know the difference between those two coffees. Partly, it makes me think, partly why there used to be a difference, it's not that long ago, is that decaffeinated, you think, it's not the fad, it's not what we're into, that's not what it's about. So you would get pretty poor green beans grown on the farm. Oh, let's just decaffeinate those.
So there wasn't a priority.
No, that's
or
right.
As much of a consideration for the actual decaf
portion
of coffee.
Exactly. But now they are doing so much care at the farm that the starting product is good. And that's where all coffee, what you taste in the cup, it's the farm where it starts. And if they do a good job there, you've got a second player, the roaster, who now needs to do a good job because he could ruin the farmer by just, I don't care. If the farmer does a good job, the roaster does a good job, you've still got another player who could ruin the whole thing. I call them the barista. The person at home or the person at your shop, whatever you go to, where they could take the great work of the farmer, the wonderful work of the roaster, and the way they pour it, the temperature of the water, whatever they do, it now tastes horrible, no matter how good the bean started.
And it's almost like from coffee or from tree to cup, that path or that chain is only as good as its weakest link.
Exactly. Yep. True.
And it can be messed up at any portion of that. And you mentioned a couple times about the Swiss water process. And I'm assuming that's the water process we talked about earlier.
That's right. There's a few different ones out there. There's a Mexican water process. There's a few different ones out there. Mountain water process. Swiss is the more commonly known one.
So Swiss is not just a name for every water process.
No,
it's just
it's a specific.
Popularized.
It's more popularized. It's a specific one that has been patented and so forth, and it's done in certain areas, and you can only do it in certain places. I think we get ours done in Canada actually. A lot of decaffeination.
Now, is it Swiss water process?
It's the word Swiss. Oh, Swiss water process.
The one you get is Swiss water process,
we do
but
now.
done in Canada.
Done in Canada, yes.
So it's the process,
not done in Switzerland.
I mean, it's not like champagne.
No.
It doesn't have to be done in Switzerland.
No, it doesn't. No. Again, that's been the difficult thing with decaffeination. Of sending it somewhere else, the cost goes up suddenly because you've got to get another second place to send it to, and get it back to yourself again. Most is done outside the United States. Actually, that's where I'm roasting coffee. There's a few that do it. There's a few places you could get it done in the States.
Wow. So what does the Swiss water process look like?
The Swiss water process is it's and the first thing it's a water based. So 25% of coffee is soluble in water, and they use that to the advantage. Now,
and does that 25% include the cherry, or is that just the green bean?
That's the green bean.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I said right at the start. I've looked at this a few times. I've looked at I've Googled Swiss water process. I've tried to talk to the Swiss water people. And after 10 years, I'm still a little confused, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'll say it up front, the basis of it seems, what I used to learn in science was osmosis. That seems to be the sort of overriding principle here. You get an equilibrium and the fluids don't change from one container to the other with a filter in between because they're equalized. But take the equilibrium away and they will start moving from one container to the other, just the pressure. I guess I don't understand all that totally. But basically, I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah,
I'll try.
mean, it's more than we already know.
Oh, well, that's good.
Well, and if you know something that we get wrong, let us know.
Yeah, that's true. All those, good. Basically, you soak the Arabica. There's Arabica and Robusta. We can talk about that another day.
Yeah.
Actually, no, we should talk about Arabica and Robusta just at this moment.
We'll do a little hit on it.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll go a little deep dive into it later.
Caffeine decaffeinated. If you get Robusta, which is one of this is getting back into the green beans and where they come from, what the plant is. You've got two main players, Arabica and Robusta. Mm-hmm. And Robusta just naturally has twice as much caffeine.
But that's also what instant coffee is made from, right?
A lot of instant coffee is made from Robusta.
Because it's cheap?
It's cheaper. It doesn't taste quite as good. It's got a robust flavour.
It's very robust.
Yes. Whereas Arabica is grown at high altitudes. I don't want to go into all that right now, but what I'm just saying is Arabica that specialty coffee uses almost exclusively, not totally, but exclusively, is half the amount, just to start with, on the plant of caffeine than you would have with Robusta. If you drink a cup of instant coffee and a cup of espresso, you can have more in the instant coffee cup because it's got that much to start with.
Which is kind of mind-boggling because I would laymanly assume that an espresso, because it's stronger, has more caffeine and all that kind of stuff, but it's actually the caffeine content doesn't really change on the way you make it, or is that not true?
No, not yeah. I mean, it's
not as drastic.
No, roasting process. It's got such a high volatile. It starts to disappear and it gets go into gases, whatever. You can't get it at a higher temperature. If you did get that high in a roaster, you'd be on fire. You don't want that in a roaster. The worst thing a roaster could ever think about.
So you take your Arabica coffee.
So you take. Oh, that's what I was saying. Yes.
Yeah, and we're soaking it in water.
Yes. Yep. And
so much like the chemical process, but just minus the chemical.
That's probably true.
Interesting.
And basically, all the soluble components come out, including the caffeine. And what they then do, this is where I get a little confused here, but the beans are discarded that they've had in there. They discard the beans. They don't completely get rid of them because they come back at one stage. Because they're going to put the fluid, I think they've got a name for it. I think it's called green coffee extract. The fluid's going to go back in at some stage, less the caffeine. That's what they're trying to do. So they isolate it first.
Wow. So they're actually taking out more than caffeine. They're taking a lot of things out. And then from that liquid, taking out just the caffeine, then reinfusing all the components back to the bean.
And it's all done with natural filters. It's all done with, as I say, osmosis. So there's no chemicals like I was talking about the last process of solvents coming in to attract like a magnet. This is done more. You can take 8 to 10 hours of this continual process going on until they detect there's no caffeine left in the fluid, and then they take that fluid, I believe, and then they put that back into the bean.
Sounds like they only employ wizards.
Basically. The good news is they do a great job. They do.
Yeah. Now, would you have a preference as someone who's tasted both, or is it so circumstantial to where it really depends on like the coffee? And I guess let me refine the question. Yeah. Let's say you get a really good decaf or a really good coffee. You take the same coffee, you decaffeinate it via the chemical process, and then you take another portion, decaffeinate it versus in the Swiss process. Come back together. Is there going to be a flavor you like better, or is it going to be more or less they could both be good?
Fortunately, I think it's going to be close.
Yeah.
But this is my personal preference. Don't hit me. But I think actually the chemical named process, the methylene chloride, actually at the bottom of the day when I cup them, it's got some negatives to it as well, but it's got a more closely related to the conventional coffee that I've tasted. I wonder if it's if that process I tried to explain but didn't do very well with the Swiss water is just the integrity of the bean. Things have been in and out of that bean, and it's just not. Some of the natural ingredients have come out as well. They didn't mean to, but it did. And trying to put them back in the bean, it's sort of worked. Like I said, the Sumatra, which is Swiss water, versus the conventional, it worked perfectly, and it was really good.
Well, and we had a Honduras recently that was really good.
Yes,
to the point where I woke up one morning and I said, I want to have Honduras because I just liked it.
Yeah.
Was that Swiss or was that chemical?
That one was Swiss. Now, that's an interesting question. We used to have a lot more of the methyl chloride, partly because it's cheaper. And the reason why methyl chloride is a little cheaper...
Well, it sounds like it's less of a process.
Less of a process. And the good thing about that, they can sell... Because you're decaffeinating it, you've got this thing left over called caffeine, and they can then sell that on, and you sell it on to pharmaceuticals particularly. You sell it on to soft drinks who want to put caffeine into their drinks, which brings the price, because they can sell it on, they get more money, they can make the original product a little less. Whereas, I think I asked once the Swiss water, and they said, what do you do with the leftover caffeine? And they burn it.
Really?
Because they don't want anything to do with chemicals. So they wouldn't want to start using it in chemical processing. Because to do it again, you'd have to put methyl chloride in to extract you have to go through the chemical process.
So you have to extract it from the liquid.
Yeah, and suddenly you've got this whole thing over again. And they don't want anything to do with chemicals, which is good. But it does increase the price.
Interesting. They burn it.
Yeah, big, yeah.
Big barrels of something.
Yeah, they just burn it up. I haven't seen it done, but it must be I
wonder what it smells like.
That would be
burning caffeine. Yeah. Like if you're too close to the fire, do you start getting a really fast heart? And just don't breathe the smoke. You'll start getting really awake.
It's possible. I know caffeine itself is colorless and odorless. You don't even see it. You can't smell caffeine, which is another point. If you say, "Oh, this drink must have a lot of caffeine in it," no. You can't smell or taste caffeine. It doesn't work that way.
Well, I remember you used to have a little vial. I think maybe I'm wrong, but of caffeine, like extract, like a powder.
Yes,
and it was like. You had a teaspoon of that and you could die.
Yes.
It was like very, very,
very concentrated. Yes. I agree. You went to the chemistry class I went to on coffee. He had a big vial of this, and he didn't want us to taste it because we would definitely not do well with that.
No, that's crazy. So we've gotten kind of a good idea of somewhat of the process, somewhat of what it looks like to get decaffeinated coffee. Farmer has to do a little bit more sending it out. You have to do a little bit more to get it, to buy it. This costs a little bit more. Swiss water process is putting on big bonfires.
Right.
And so kind of the tail end of that is your part of it, other than obviously us drinking it, that kind of stuff. Roasting challenges. And this I would assume is similar for both decaffeinated coffee. So it's more of a generally decaffeinated coffee has some extra roasting challenge, or it's different. What are some of those? What are the roasting challenges you find?
Which I sort of alluded to before about lower starting temperature. That's what roasting. I love the thought of it's a science and it's an art. So you've got your logs and you're sort of calculating what the temperature is, what the time is, and how long things. When you hear the crack, you push a button and say, "Okay, here's first crack," and you can time that out and see how the temperature goes, the rate of rise. There's a whole lot of things in there, but the other part's the art, and it's just roasting coffee. Anyone can do. You don't have to have a big roaster. Have your popcorn popper and you're roasting. We can talk about that one day.
Well, and just a side note, I saw this thing, and I think I tweeted it, but there's a coffee roaster looks like a popcorn popper. You can get it, and you can. It's like a countertop appliance, and there's a little knob, and you set what roast you want, and then you pour the coffee in, and it does all the roasting for you.
Oh, right, yeah.
I don't know how good it is.
Oh,
but
no.
that we're going to get on another topic, but I just thought I'd throw that in there.
But you don't have to get a popcorn popper, although you need a certain type, but I'm not going to go there. But these days you do have more variety of, it's air roasting mainly. There's a few that do it like a drum, but there's a few good air.
Well, even Tim, our friend Tim,
yes,
he roasted in a bread maker with a heat gun.
Oh, right, mate. Or you can go camping. Didn't we talk about camping?
I think we did it.
Popcorn popper. Yeah. I mean, you can do it.
If you want to make friends camping, start roasting coffee.
That's a good idea.
So
sorry, we were talking about roasting coffee.
So you're talking about the art of it, almost like the feel of roasting it.
What I would suggest is you just got to dive in and roast it and make a few bad batches perhaps to start with. You've got a sample roaster better. You can just give some trial and error because, as I said before, it's not so much about the colour because it's different to start with. Swiss probably is the most different colour of all the different styles of roasting. There was another one, but I didn't mention it. They call it critical carbon dioxide. Don't need to worry about that too much, but that's another process of carbon dioxide getting pressurized, so it moves from a liquid to a gas or vice versa, and they take it in and out again, and voila.
They start a bunch of cars, and they feed the exhaust pipes into a room or something.
You've got the basic idea. I mean, we're talking about 3,500, what do they call it? PSIG or something, pressure.
PSI.
PSI, that's what I would call it. Whereas a tyre pressure, that's 15.
Well, if you've got a low tire, it's
15. Low tire. Oh, sorry, 35, sorry, I should say. And a basic compressor that goes up to 100. But we're talking about 3,500.
I hate to be standing next to that.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't want to stand next to that.
So, roasting it, it's going to be a little bit different. It's kind of a little bit of trial and error because it's going to react differently to heat, to the amount of time it takes. Also, visually, where you're looking at it in your trier is going to be a whole new experience of just recalibrating almost to what decaf coffee looks like.
It starts a little more tan, as I was saying, and therefore it goes a little darker. You don't get to see oil as much. You don't even hear the first crack, which in most coffees you'll hear the first crack.
So if you are going the second crack and you hear a crack, that is the second crack.
Probably you're at second crack, which therefore you rely on your thermocouple on your roaster more than by sight. Wow. And another thing you rely on is smell.
Interesting.
You can smell it. That changes. Coffee does. You rely on all your senses for coffee roasting.
Wow, that's I'm amazed. So kind of as we wrap up the episode, we've gone through kind of the whole process. You kind of alluded to it a couple times, but as we get it into the cup, well, except for that Sumatra that apparently is the same. But
I'm sure there's others too.
Because it kind of sounds like what's happening in the industry at the moment is caffeinated coffee and decaffeinated coffee. Decaf is kind of catching up. It's playing catch up, but it's catching up quickly. And you're more likely to find a quality decaf than you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So there's more of a variety of quality decaf, but generally speaking, over decaf at the moment, and this could change, but what are you going to expect that's lacking or that's different about a decaf coffee that's going to be there in the caffeinated version? Or is there a significant thing that is lacking from decaf, like acidity or body? Or
right, I see what you're saying. Yes.
Or is it pretty much it just is different?
Nice thing, it's getting closer, and that makes it a harder question for me, which is good. I mean, things have changed. As I said, my feeling right now, and it may be just a feeling, is the decaf, because it goes through the extra process, it's just adding some extra possibilities for it to not be as good as its caffeinated counterpart. Particularly if I thought about it, we're probably talking more about just some of the natural acidity in a coffee is possibly going to be more missing in the decaffeinated process. So you like a lot of acidity, it may not be there as much. I'm not saying that's a rule, but
that's generally a feeling kind of for that.
Yeah.
Well, because you are tampering with
it, yeah. And whenever you start tampering with something, it's going to change it no matter how good a job you do. And I think people are doing a great job now, which is wonderful news for a lot of people.
So generally speaking, if I'm at a cafe and they say, "Hey, we have decaf," and would it be appropriate to be like, "Hey, what process do you use?" And based on that kind of, okay, if it was Swiss, well, chances are at least that process was better. So I'm more likely to get a good decaf, or is there any kind of indicator people can use? I mean, there's so many variables, but at least the decaffeination process, what's a good indicator?
I wouldn't think so much. I wouldn't think about asking about the process so much. As I say, it's the in thing to do Swiss water process at the moment. I don't think that's necessarily totally true. And it's not the whole picture. Probably, a better question to ask for decaf. You need to ask it for all coffee, but is when was this roasted? And I say that because a lot of decaf gets the hard end of the deal. And they just put it there. As I said, we only roast 10%, so probably a cafe is only going to do 10% at the most of their selling coffee is going to be decaf. So it gets sort of left in the hopper a little too long. If you look at it, it starts looking really oily. That's an indicator that it's probably a little older because decaffeinated coffee sometimes doesn't have a lot of oil. So where's that oil coming from? So I mean, it's just things.
And its color, should you expect decaf coffee to look darker or lighter?
Sure, there's probably a lot of people think differently on that. Typically, I would say people think it looks a little darker. It doesn't necessarily mean it's gone to the second crack, although some people like that. But it's going to definitely look a little darker than if it's in two hoppers. There's a
If we have the same coffee next to each other,
you'll see that they will look different, and that's not a bad thing to say. Oh, they're different. It's a good start. And ask if, I don't know, first time. Usually, if they're really good, they'd say, "Do you want to have a taste it? First time, we'll just give you one for free, and you can taste it." You could taste it as a pourer, or guess what? You could taste it in espresso. And
yeah. Well, I mean, there's also that. There's so many ways to taste it, and how does it react, and all those different.
Right.
I think that might be another episode.
Oh, mate, so many
how
episodes.
What different brew styles affect it differently?
And what caffeine medically, is it good or bad? The jury is still out. I think the jury's in on that. I think it's probably got more benefits than lacking. Although excess is always going to be a problem in everything.
Well, there's another episode, caffeine.
Oh yeah, goes on.
There's a counterpart to this episode, decaffeinated, and then we got to do a caffeinated.
Caffeinated, holy bit.
So, general rule of thumb: if you're in a cafe and you're wanting to get decaf, or you're bold enough to try, you're going to look for coffee that's not oily, and that goes for regular coffee as well.
It's
but
true.
With decaf, especially if you see oil, steer clear.
Here's a tip.
Yeah.
Whether either one, you could ask, could you just grind a little bit of that one, a little bit of that one, just put in a cup, because that's not going to cost them anything, and just smell it.
Oh, there you go. And
if it's got no smell, it's probably old.
Brilliant. So, have them grind a little bit if they will.
Yes.
And otherwise, look at the oils. It is okay if it looks a little bit darker. That may be just part of that process and should be okay. And give it a try. Give it a shot.
That's for a shot, because then they don't have to do any milk or anything. It's quick for them, and you've just had 2 shots of coffee. Nice.
Or almost, or
one shot because one's been decaffeinated.
Yeah. If someone else has a coffee and there's some left over. I mean, there's so many ways to try it. But
the good news is that it's not such trial and error as 10 years ago. I think people realize, particularly cafes now, realize that you can get good decaffeinated coffee, and there's some really good reasons to have decaffeinated coffee. Your doctor says you probably should listen to the doctor.
Yeah, right. No, I agree.
But you don't have to go off coffee completely. You can still get good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like that's a good synopsis of kind of touching the bases there. So, yeah. Try it. I think that's the biggest thing. The more people that try it, the more interest, the more popularity it has, the better it's going to get. I mean, that's really kind of where the more demand there is for it, the more farmers are going to be able to get money for that, all that kind of stuff. So go have a decaf coffee. Try it out. If you don't like decaf, have it really late at night. Go to find a coffee shop that's open super late. Then you don't have to feel like bad about it.
Yeah.
And
if you're still awake after that, you realize it was the chocolate, it wasn't the coffee.
Or the barista lied to you.
I've heard of stories about that.
If the coffee looks the same, question it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as always, feel free to check us out at beanstuff.com. You'll always have the latest episode to play there. As well as links to everywhere you can find us. If you're listening to this podcast, obviously you found it. But if you want to share it, that's super awesome. If you have any ideas for episodes you'd love to hear stuff about, tweet us at beanstuff_, at bean_stuff. I can't talk today.
That's right.
At bean_stuff on Twitter, and then at bean_stuff on Facebook. We're also on Instagram at bean_stuff. We're hitting it all up. But let us know, and also hit us up on Anchor. You can leave us messages through the Anchor app, which is super cool. a shout out to Anchor. There's a guy, Brian, there that's been helping me out. He is awesome. And we're not paid by Anchor, but
Good.
it's super cool. So there's all those things. So feel free to get involved and tune in next week. We plan to be doing this episode so that it releases every Friday. I feel like that's a good day to that's a good day to listen to coffee stuff.
Yeah.
So Fridays, plan on listening to Bean Stuff. Thanks for listening.
It's my